Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Anna Farberov. She is the general manager at PepsiCo Labs, and she is at the cutting edge of technology and innovation at Pepsi. And we're going to talk to her a little bit about PepsiCo Labs, what is that, and how Pepsi goes about looking at different innovative solutions and some of the most interesting innovative solutions or technologies that she's seen in her time there, or maybe that she sees coming up in the future as well. And we're going to focus into, of course, on the warehouse side of things as well. So, Anna, very excited to have you on. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very interested to talk to you and learn more about this. I think it's always interesting to get the perspective from a large company who's implementing some innovative technologies and see really what's working for them and what's really out there in the market that's maybe feasible from an innovation perspective in a way. So obviously, I think people know what Pepsi is, right? But why don't you tell us a little bit about Pepsi Labs, which is a part of Pepsi?
So I think before I dive into PepsiCo Labs, I think many
Mhm.
people know the brands, right? So we all
Yeah.
eat, Lay's and Cheetos and Doritos and Quaker, and then drink Pepsis and Gatorade, etc. But I think many people don't realize how vertically integrated our value chain is.
Mhm.
So we start with what we call seed to shelf. So basically, we grow the potatoes, we own the seed, right? We are, fun
Oh
fact,
wow.
8% of the world's potatoes. So we are a very large agriculture company in essence.
Mm.
Then we use our own trucks to ship the potato here in North America. So we are the largest private fleet in North America. That's massive,
Yeah.
right? We have a lot of vehicles, all shapes and sizes, all the way to warehouses and manufacturing sites, and a very dense network of kind of operational sites. And then we are the ones shipping the product directly to the store. So, what we call a DSD model, direct store delivery.
Hmm.
So, it's not a warehouse model like some of the other CPGs because of the nature of the product, fast turnover, short shelf life. We put it directly in each and every store. So we have a very large frontline force that includes merchandisers and drivers and salespeople
Hmm.
that make sure that our product is on shelf. So, and then the consumer elements, right? So imagine marketing and branding and all of those interesting things are probably less relevant for warehouse folks. But when you think of the sheer size of what we touch everything, right?
Hmm.
So that's PepsiCo. And within that universe, what my team does is looks for technologies that can solve problems or bring a lot of value in every step of the way. And because we're so big, right? So small changes can go a lot. Imagine if we find a way to grow potatoes better or
Yeah.
use less water in our irrigation or improve the throughput of our warehouses and push orders or increase accuracy of our pick orders or automate and digitize our quality processes. So anything there is very significant. And PepsiCo, if I zoom in onto PepsiCo Labs, we have a very pragmatic approach to innovation. Right? We
Mm.
look at what are the biggest problems in the business. We go to the business experts. We ask them, what can we do for you? What can we solve? What will have a big impact? Then we scout for external solutions out there specifically for those needs. So it's not who has a shiny, cool toy. It is more, I have a problem, who can help me solve it fast?
Mm.
And then the solutions that we find, the ones that we think are the best fit, we would pilot just to see if it works in a small bubblegum pilot in a real world environment, but fairly fast. And the successful ones we scale globally. So we take them from one successful implementation in, let's say, one line to a full kind of global scale or, let's say, a full implementation in the relevant scope.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's great too to have that background that you gave. So I appreciate that. And, understanding the whole, like you said, seed to shelf, right? Which is, I mean, that's truly the full process, right? I mean, starting from the seed itself, right, and being able to generate that product and then deliver it, and I guess that's kind of explanatory too of why we, if we're in the grocery store, right, or a convenience store, we see like somebody coming in and stocking the shelves with the Fritos or the Lay's and the Pepsi on the shelf as well. And I think that makes it's a good explanation of why we see that. So it's very interesting, and there's a lot of, as you said, opportunity there, I'm sure, to look at many different solutions in all of those different aspects. So I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned maybe you might pilot something on one line before you roll it out in total. I mean, do you have like an actual maybe innovation center, or is there actually like a labs space where you do this, or do you just test on live locations that you already have, or how does that work?
So it's interesting because we right now it's live locations, right? So
Mm,
right now it is
interesting.
going into an actual manufacturing site or warehouse and testing there. We are considering doing like a small, creating a sandbox for earlier
Mm,
stage technologies, so things that are too early to disrupt. I mean, at the end of the day, when you test something in a real site, then there is some disruption
yeah.
that we're willing to accept. But if it is too early, we might want to de-risk that a bit and put it in a small sandbox. But for now, yes, we look. Most of our solutions are quite mature. We're
Mm,
looking to pilot them today, and if they're successful, scale them tomorrow. So we are testing them in a real world environment by the real experts, right? So it is not me as an innovation leader testing them. It is the actual warehouse operational experts who are very good at what they do, and they do it for a long time, and they will be able to very quickly tell us, does this work, yes or no, does it help them.
interesting. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting approach to be able to implement it live. And as you said, I mean, a lot of times there's I think some organizations have fear around disruption, right? But it's great that you've been able to figure out a way to I guess manage that disruption so that it's not a catastrophic disruption in a way, right? So I'm curious, I mean, how you kind of approach innovation itself. I mean, I noticed on your LinkedIn, on your banner image, I think it says something about looking for world changing technology, right? So I mean, I think you're always kind of on the hunt, is the impression I get, for the next greatest innovation that can help you guys at Pepsi solve those problems, like you said. And I thought it was interesting too that you mentioned there that you try to not necessarily go off after the shiny object. You're more concerned about what's the problem at hand and who has the solution for that. So I'm curious, what's the thought process for searching for these innovative solutions? How does your team go about that? And how do you kind of discover some of the new things that are out there?
So I think you're right, it all starts with a strategy. I think
Mm,
you can have two approaches to innovation, or you can come at it from two different angles. Some teams look at it tech forward, meaning here is quantum computing, what can it do for me, how can
mm,
I apply it in the business? We are very much the other way around. We go to the strategy, right? So let's say, if I stay in the world of warehouses, right? A couple of years ago, we focused on e-commerce. E-commerce,
mm,
a growing business for us, like everybody else, and requires a different approach to warehousing because you want a very large number of SKUs, moving fast in a small footprint. The traditional way of picking product in the warehouse was manual,
yeah.
which required a very large footprint. So if you move that to it was slow, not perfectly accurate, and required a large
Hmm.
footprint because people were literally walking up and down. So when the business came, or when we started partnering with the ecom team, and they said we need this, but closer to the city, which means a smaller footprint,
Hmm.
but we cannot compromise throughput and we cannot compromise number of SKUs. So we cannot go down in the
Yeah.
product availability. And then the approach, and then you have this problem defined, and with that you go out into the world and you look for solutions.
Mm,
And there's a lot more. This is kind of at the high level, but in the background we also knew how this will integrate, how whatever solution we find will integrate with our tech stack, right, with the rest of our technologies on site. what is the size of the price. So if we solve it, how much growth it will enable. So is this a big problem or a small problem? Will it be easy or complex to integrate? And it gives you visibility to kind of the entire strategy. And then with that, we went and we landed with micro fulfillment centers, right? So an
Mm,
automated storage and retrieval system that can be used on a very small footprint, right? So
mm,
growing or allowing us to have the same throughput with the same number of SKUs or even more SKUs, but fully automated small footprint, right? So the 3D.
right.
And in that case, I can also mention the name of the company. It was a company called AutoStore, and we
Okay.
are scaling them across all of our e-com warehouse facilities.
Hmm. Interesting. So now I love that you're focusing on the micro fulfillment aspect too, because I think that's been such a push in e-commerce over the last few years, especially. And you mentioned, trying to get closer to that customer and have that faster delivery. And I think that's great that you're able to enable the ASRS solution to be able to automate that facility and, like you said, maximize the capacity and throughput of that space, which is very important, especially as you get closer to more densely populated areas where the cost of real estate is higher. It's harder to find a perfectly square or rectangular building sometimes, right? So you need some flexibility within that. So it's very interesting that you've done that. And I'm curious, you mentioned this e-commerce example, and obviously we love the warehouse here on this podcast, right? So I'm curious. I mean, how much of because you guys are focusing on, like you said, seed to shelf, which is a lot of different areas, a lot of different steps within the supply chain and just the business in general. But what percentage or how much focus do you think ends up being on the innovation side within that warehouse or distribution fulfillment side of things?
Well, quite a lot, because when you think of it, we the company is vertically integrated end to end, but
Hmm.
a large chunk of our P&L sits within operations,
Right.
right? So a big percent of our cost is there. So anything we can do to increase efficiency, will have a significant bottom line impact.
Mm,
Right. So and actually my team, so last year we had a full warehouse focus with where we kind of the way we operate is usually we would go very deep on one topic,
yeah.
flesh out those big use cases, look for startups, bring them in, pilot them, around 10 pilots per program. And then the successful ones we would scale globally,
Mm,
or again the relevant across the relevant geographies. With last year's warehouse program, we focused on four topics, one of them automation, right? So
hmm.
self-explanatory, automating a lot of our manual work, picking from belt, loading, offloading containers, etc. Optimizing the flow, meaning a lot of kind of digital twin scenarios,
Mm,
how can we better sequence, how can we better consolidate orders, how can we optimize some of our picking, etc. We had a chunk of work around inventory, so how can we track inventory end to end, again, for visibility, for accuracy of tracking, etc.
right.
And then the last one was around people, right? So how can we help our associates onboard faster? How can we improve and automate some of their kind of daily tasks and decision making? A lot of learning and development, etc. So those were kind of the four buckets, and right now we have active pilots across all of them.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too that you not only, because I think a lot of the industry, there's a lot of conversation. Like I was just at Modex last week, and I was just talking to somebody today that was at Logimat this week. And obviously there's such a spotlight on automation, I think, in a sense, right? I mean, you can't really go anywhere in like logistics or warehousing without hearing about robots or automation and what's going on with that. But I love too that you said one of your focus is automation, which I think is at this point in everybody's kind of purview is like becoming a necessity, right? But I love that one of your focuses too was on people as well, because there's still a huge human and people element within the warehouse. And even though, there's tasks like you mentioned previously, the e-commerce operation, people were walking a lot, right? Being able to do those things, but you're able to now reduce that transportation through the ASRS, right, and automating those micro fulfillment centers to be able to do that. So I'm curious, in those technologies or technologies that you've maybe seen recently or heard about, what's kind of catching your attention the most, and is it more on an automated focus, or is it more on improving like the workers' daily life?
I think we always put the associates and our employees in the center, right?
Mm,
We we are always thinking of how can we focus their day around the significant value add tasks. How
mm,
can we eliminate some of, in the warehouse space, you have a lot of work, I mean, a lot of tasks that nobody wants to do. Nobody wants to lift heavy cases and
right.
manually build pallets. Nobody wants to move cases around from belt to a cart and vice versa. um, and I think as consumer or as people, we are used to a very different experience outside of a warehouse, right? Because we all have very smartphones, and
Yeah.
the world around us is being digitized fast, and we are trying to bring that same expectation and experience into the warehouse, right? Which is not easy. It takes some time, but everything we do, I mean, technology cannot be done for the sake of technology.
Yeah.
You can't just throw a lot of tech or robotics at a warehouse and expect it to happen. You need to center it around the human element and then bring the people with you on the journey.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's such a great point because it is so, it's like I think there's some perception, or maybe it's marketing a little bit, that it's like, okay, we throw automation, robotics, and all of a sudden our labor challenges are solved, right? And it's not quite the truth, right? I mean, I think that's a great point that you made there, that you have to center around the human, because I mean, I think like, the dark warehouse or the lights out warehouse is very, very far off in the distance to be kind of a widespread thing. And I think the human element is still going to be there. So, how do you center those solutions around that human element? I think is a great takeaway there from you. I mean, I think that's so important, as you not only look at like a robotics or an automation solution, but also a software aspect as well. So I'm curious from that perspective, because you mentioned, in our consumer daily lives outside of work, we're used to very intuitive, user friendly devices. How important is that, and how have you seen a shift in technologies, like, for example, maybe handheld devices that you're using within facilities? How much of a focus is put on that user interface, and how important is that in some of these newer technologies that are coming out?
It's very important. It's been a focus for multiple use cases across operations. So there are use cases for that in agriculture, trying to minimize some of kind of the manual decision making or the
Mm,
manual kind of tasks, all the way down to warehouse. So when you think of, I can give you a simple example of something that we've deployed recently: scanning labels, right? So
mm,
probably the old way was scanning with kind of a manual scanner one by one. That
yeah.
was very slow, very repetitive. We've all of our associates have a company device, a tablet or an iPhone, or we've implemented a scanned it solution
Okay.
that can scan the whole cart within one photo. You just kind of point and
Wow.
scan, and it is accurate. So it captures multiple labels, and it can also read one of the problem, because we use our cases. Sometimes you have five different labels on the
Mm,
same case. So it is so accurate, and it connects to the kind of the back end and the warehouse management system, so it can also identify the right label. So imagine just kind of the impact on that associate's life, going from doing this 50 times per car to just doing
mhm,
one. Right? And that's
yeah.
kind of one example. But anything from how can we reduce the number of papers moving around when you do reconciliations of product, moving the whole chain of custody, moving from one end to the other, involves historically a lot of manual reconciliation, a lot of
mhm.
papers, right? So how can we automate and digitize some of those elements? Because there's no value in doing this manually.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said that about the paper because I think like my advice to people always is when you're looking at process improvement, like the first place to look always is like where are people walking or where is their paper, right? And I think that's like you start to attack those two elements first, and that's where you see like those initial kind of gains. So I'm curious as you look at processes and as they're brought to you as like, hey, this is our problem. Like you gave the example of the e-commerce case. This is our problem. How do you start to kind of dissect the problem and the, I guess, existing process to really figure out, okay, where can we really make an impact and improvement on this?
So I think it starts with the problem, but we also have an idea of what can be a good approach for the solution,
Mm,
right? And then with that in mind, we go out and we look at different solutions. Sometimes, I think 80% of times we find exactly what we've asked for, and then 20% of times we find things we could not even ask for because we did not know they exist. So a unique
mm,
way of solving or
interesting.
approaching a problem, or um, kind of, a new approach, or something that will disrupt even our own thinking. So, if I have one example in mind where we thought we kind of always assume that we will need to own a few sites and facilities and parking lots for our trucks, and then
Hmm.
we met a company that had a different approach. Like, oh my gosh, maybe we don't need to own this because there's a new model, right? So when you think of gig labor or merchandisers, right? So
Yeah,
usually you need more labor in warehouses, in stores, everywhere, on your peak holidays, right? So
yeah.
you have a lot more volume going out during Fourth of July, during Super Bowl weekend, etc. And but you cannot employ for that, for the peak demand.
Mm,
So imagine, and gig was a concept that did not exist, or marketplace for gig or for last mile did not exist. But then all of a sudden, there's a whole new way of solving something that we could not ask for because we did not invent gig,
yeah.
right? It was not something that we thought of 5 years ago. And when you think of this kind of new idea, which is not so new, but let's say new to the industry of marketplaces for, can I gig out my delivery? I don't need to use my own truck where it doesn't make
Hmm.
sense. Can I gig out some of the merchandising elements? Can I gig out some of my warehouse work at high demand? So can that create or bring flexibility into my operation? So those are kind of the type of things that we did not know what we're looking for until we found them.
Mm,
Um, but then again, 80% of times I think we kind of know. So
yeah.
some of the problems are kind of straightforward.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too. You mentioned the gig workers and an economy there that's kind of entered into the more industrial space, I guess, from manufacturing, transportation, and warehousing space. And I've used some of those myself too. And I think it's such a fantastic thing. So much better than a traditional like temp agency, I will say, for being able to handle that and just have visibility around that too. It's a great thing that you guys are embracing that. And I'm curious. So, I mean, do you have? Because you said kind of like 80% of the time you already kind of know, right? So, I'm sure you guys are Pepsi, right? Everybody knows Pepsi, so I'm sure all the time you're getting people pitching you new solutions, new technologies. I mean, do you have like some kind of database or a bank of these solutions to kind of keep in the in the back of your head when the problem arises and it's like, oh, I remember something from like a year ago somebody was talking about. Let's take a look at that now. Is that something that you guys keep track of?
Yeah, we do. So I think, I mean, you can approach us either at the perfect timing for your
Hmm.
solution, because this is exactly, I'm currently focused on manufacturing. So we are looking
Mm,
for manufacturing solutions across a wide range of buckets. If you come to me with this problem, this or with a solution that can address this problem, then that's perfect timing because I have all of my experts aligned, waiting to review, give feedback, and then execute a pilot if this
mm,
is the right fit. But if you come to me now with, let's say, a warehouse or fleet solution, which is a program that's already in motion, meaning
mm,
I am already fully kind of at capacity with the number of pilots that I can run, and I cannot take on more pilots until I free up some capacity. So yes, we would probably put that in the back of our minds, but also in an actual system. So we have a database of solutions
Mm.
that we keep track of to make sure that we can pull in the right ones. But definitely the best way or the best timing to approach us is during those scouting efforts that are concentrated. We do 8 programs a year. So
Yeah.
we address a variety of different topics, so 8 different topics a year. And then we kind of, many of them we revisit again. But if you looked at my LinkedIn, I'm not sure if you've seen my manufacturing call out for solutions.
Okay.
It's out there.
Yeah.
And on
Oh,
our
no.
website, PepsiCoLabs.com, it's all kind of there, super detailed.
Nice, nice. So hint, if anybody is listening, has a manufacturing solution.
Yeah. I know it's a
You know,
warehouse audience, but it's close
yeah, yeah.
enough.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I think a lot of the solutions too that we talk about could go on both sides of the table there, manufacturing versus warehouse as well. So it's very interesting to learn from you and learn about this here. I'm curious. As we talked about, you mentioned some solutions in there that you've done, but like we mentioned on your LinkedIn, you're looking for world changing technologies. So I'm curious, can you tell us maybe what's one technology or solution that you've found and implemented that really has just stuck in your head as one of the ones that just kind of blew your mind a little bit?
Oh, there's a lot. Oh gosh, it's like selecting a favorite child. I think the
Let's get a
uh,
top three then, maybe.
yeah, top three. I can give it so around. Let's maybe anchor around capability. So I think
Sure.
ASRS, right? So we've mentioned AutoStore.
Hmm.
AutoStore has been a great solution for our e-commerce business, which is
Mm.
more eaches driven, meaning it is small orders where we literally pick individual
Yeah.
bags, right? From there, and that was our first kind of experiment and deployment with those types of automated systems, so automated storage and retrieval. Then we are now expanding into cases. So a similar capability for our large warehouses, focusing
Hmm.
on cases with another solution provider that I cannot announce yet. Um,
Oh, we'll be waiting for that.
yeah, it's gonna be public at some point, but not yet.
Okay.
But it is, it's a much bigger scope,
Hmm.
much bigger impact and reach. And then the next generation of that will be full pallets. So there's another early
Mm.
stage solution that we are kind of looking into that will do the same, but at a pallet level, right? So same basic solution or capability, but we are partnering with different providers because they have different proposals from
Mm.
eaches, so individual bags to cases and then to full pallets.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I heard last week when I was at Modex, a lot of people talking about that case problem and looking for solutions there around that. So I'm curious to find out in the future who you're working with, and what that looks like. But it's very interesting to hear from you, and I love the approach too, where you talked about looking at solutions for the eaches and then working your way up to the larger kind of pack sizes, the carton, and then the pallet as well. So I think that's a really interesting thing to hear about, and it's been very interesting to talk to you here and learn all about Pepsi Labs and how you guys approach innovation. And I'm curious as we close out here. Some people may say that you have a dream job, right? You get to play with the latest technology, get to
I say
experiment
I
with
have a
it.
dream job.
I remember when we first talked, you said that, yeah, and I have some students that I teach, and maybe that listen sometimes as well, and I'm curious what would be like your career tip to maybe one day get the dream job.
Um, Career tips: don't be afraid to take risks,
Mm.
right? So move away from your comfort zone. That's the only way to grow, and
Yeah,
jump in the deep end
yeah.
responsibly. But you have to, in order to move forward, you have to move away from the comfort zone. That will be kind of number one. Number two, be curious, ask questions.
Mm.
I keep asking people around me for their opinion, for their perspective, how they would address something, what they're doing, right? So, what are the people? I just had a call just before that interviewing somebody for a new role on my team, and And
Hmm.
he was working at a part of PepsiCo that I didn't know. And you would think that I spoke to everybody by now because
Yeah.
that's what I do. But I was like, oh my gosh, so how do you do that? How do you, he's on one of the customers team. So what does that
Mm,
mean? How do you actually deliver the product? How do you make the product? How do you, so I think being curious and asking questions will expand your just perspective, right? You will see how
mm,
different people are doing different things. What are the opportunities to approach a problem? Um, and I guess find your people,
mm.
right? At the end of the day, automation, no automation, we are a social creature. So find your people. I
Yeah.
think it's very important to to be happy to go into your office and look forward to having coffee with your friends. I
Mm,
think going to an office you don't want to go to is very sad. Even if you like
yeah.
your job, if you don't like being around the people, it will make your life probably not as happy, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's great advice, and I would totally agree with you. And I love the go outside your comfort zone thing because I will say for me, like in my career, anytime that I really pushed to the next level or did something like more impactful, I think every time I took before I took that action, I had like butterflies in my stomach. Right, it was like, oh, should I do this? Should I not do this? And then you do it, and you really kind of make that breakthrough, and take yourself to the next level. So I really appreciate those tips from you, and I think that's a great thing. And it's been incredible to hear from you here, Anna, and learn about PepsiCo Labs and just kind of the approach to innovation overall, and some of the really great insights that you've brought to us here today. So if people are interested in learning more about PepsiCo Labs, what's the best way to do that?
I think our website, although we don't always keep it up to date because we focus a lot on kind of getting things done. But yes, I think our website has always the latest focus areas that we're scouting for. It has a few examples of solutions that we've scaled across the company, and then it also has our process social. So usually the team posts on LinkedIn
Mm,
either again focus areas, success stories, examples to the work that we do. So those will probably be the best. Yeah, and we attend conferences from time to time. So you've mentioned Modex. I was at Manifest just a
yes.
week
Yeah.
before that with 20 of PepsiCo's leaders across operations from fleet, warehouse, and manufacturing. And we met a lot of people, and a few of our um, solutions, either scaling or piloting, were there, and they kind of showcase some of the work that we're doing together. So conferences are also a good way to find us, but there's a lot of conferences, so that's
Yes. Yeah. It
harder.
feels like they're never ending these
Yeah,
days.
the
The conferences.
inflation
Yeah.
of conferences.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really appreciate that. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com so people that are interested can learn more and learn from you. And also, maybe if they want to pitch their ideas to you as well, find a chance to do that. So, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today, and very thankful to have your time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.